On September 15, 2012, at exactly 6:47 p.m., the Coast Guard received a Mayday call that would haunt investigators for over a decade. The voice on the radio belonged to 42-year-old Michael Thompson, a respected insurance executive from Newport Beach, California. His words were barely audible through the static. "This is sailing vessel Aurora. We're taking on water. My daughter Emma. She's gone overboard. I can't find her." That transmission was the last anyone would hear from Michael Thompson or his 8-year-old daughter Emma. For 12 years, their disappearance remained one of California's most baffling maritime mysteries. The official Coast Guard report concluded that father and daughter had perished in rough seas during an unexpected storm. Case closed. But Jennifer Thompson never stopped believing her husband and daughter were still out there somewhere. What she discovered after 12 years of relentless investigation would expose one of the most calculated family betrayals in modern true crime history. The man she had trusted with her daughter's life had orchestrated their disappearances as part of an elaborate insurance fraud scheme worth over $2 million. Welcome back to our channel. If this story shocks you as much as it did our research team, please subscribe and ring that notification bell. This case will challenge everything you think you know about family loyalty and the lengths some people will go to escape financial ruin. Let me know in the comments what your initial thoughts are about this case as we dive deeper. The Thompson family lived what many would consider the American dream in Newport Beach, one of California's most affluent coastal communities. Michael worked as a senior executive at Pacific Coast Insurance, earning a 6-figure salary and maintaining an impeccable reputation in the industry. Jennifer ran a successful interior design business from their $1.8 million oceanfront home. 8-year-old Emma was a bright, energetic child who loved sailing with her father every weekend. To their neighbors and friends, the Thompsons appeared to have it all. Michael drove a pristine BMW, Jennifer hosted elegant dinner parties, and Emma attended private school. They were active members of the Newport Harbor Yacht Club, where Michael served on the board of directors. On the surface, their life gleamed like the polished deck of Michael's 36-foot sailboat, the Aurora. But as we've learned from countless true crime cases, the most dangerous predators often hide behind masks of respectability and success. Michael Thompson had spent years perfecting his image as the devoted family man and successful businessman. What no one knew was that beneath this carefully constructed facade, Michael was drowning in debt and desperation. The cracks in Michael's financial empire had begun forming 3 years before that fateful September day. In 2009, the real estate market collapse had devastated his investment portfolio. He had leveraged their home equity to purchase multiple rental properties in Las Vegas and Phoenix, convinced that the housing market would continue its upward trajectory. When the bubble burst, Michael found himself owing nearly $3 million on properties worth less than half that amount. Rather than confessing his financial mistakes to Jennifer, Michael chose deception. He began forging documents to hide their mounting debt. Credit card statements were intercepted before Jennifer could see them. Bank notices were redirected to a private mailbox. Michael even created fake financial statements using his knowledge of the insurance industry to make their situation appear stable. By 2012, the house of cards was collapsing. The couple's credit cards were maxed out at over $200,000. Mortgage payments on their primary residence and rental properties were 6 months behind. The IRS had begun garnishing Michael's wages for unpaid taxes totaling $150,000. Most critically, the bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings on their Newport Beach home. Michael knew it was only a matter of weeks before Jennifer would discover the truth. In his twisted mind, there was only one solution that would solve all their problems and preserve his reputation. He would disappear with Emma, collect on their substantial life insurance policies, and start a new life somewhere far from California. The plan Michael devised was as methodical as it was monstrous. He had spent months studying maritime accident reports through his work at the insurance company. He knew exactly how to stage a disappearance that would appear to be a tragic accident while leaving enough ambiguity to prevent authorities from declaring them dead immediately. 3 months before the disappearance, Michael had quietly increased both his and Emma's life insurance policies. His coverage jumped from $500,000 to $1.5 million, while Emma's policy was raised from $100,000 to $500,000. When questioned by the insurance agent about the increases, Michael explained that his promotion at work required higher coverage. As an industry executive, his explanation raised no red flags. Michael also began modifying the Aurora in subtle ways that would support his planned deception. He loosened several through-hull fittings that could be easily removed during the trip. He replaced the boat's emergency radio with an older model that had limited range. Most cunningly, he installed a hidden bilge pump that could be activated remotely to quickly flood the boat's lower compartments. The psychological profile that emerges of Michael Thompson matches what forensic psychologists call a family annihilator. Someone who views their family members as possessions to be controlled rather than individuals with their own rights. These perpetrators often see murder as a rational solution to problems that threaten their self-image or social standing. Dr. Catherine Mills, a forensic psychologist who has studied similar cases, explains, family annihilators typically share certain characteristics. They're often controlling personalities who present a successful facade to the outside world. When that facade is threatened, they're willing to destroy their entire family rather than face public humiliation or financial ruin. What makes Michael's case particularly disturbing is how he involved Emma in his deception. Rather than killing his daughter outright, Michael planned to fake both their deaths and take Emma to live under assumed identities in a country without extradition treaties with the United States. In his warped thinking, he was saving Emma from the shame of poverty and scandal. Let me pause here and ask you something. What do you think drives someone to involve their own child in such an elaborate deception? Have you ever known someone who seemed perfect on the outside but was hiding devastating secrets? Share your thoughts in the comments because this psychological aspect is crucial to understanding how such cases unfold. On the morning of September 15, 2012, Michael followed his usual weekend routine. He loaded the Aurora with supplies for what he told Jennifer would be a father-daughter sailing trip to Catalina Island. Emma was excited about the adventure, packing her favorite stuffed animal and the new book she was reading. Jennifer kissed them both goodbye at the marina, never imagining it would be the last time she would see her daughter. Weather conditions that Saturday were ideal for sailing, sunny skies, light winds, and calm seas. The Aurora was equipped with all required safety equipment, including life jackets, flares, and emergency radio. Michael had filed a float plan with the harbor master, indicating they would return by Sunday evening. At 2:30 p.m., the Aurora was spotted by the crew of a commercial fishing vessel approximately 12 miles southwest of Newport Beach. The fishermen later told investigators that Michael and Emma appeared to be enjoying a peaceful afternoon sail. The boat was moving under normal sail power, and both father and daughter were visible on deck. For hours later, everything changed. The Mayday call that came in at 6:47 p.m. painted a picture of sudden disaster. Michael's voice was strained and urgent as he reported that the Aurora was taking on water rapidly. He claimed that Emma had been knocked overboard by the boom during an unexpected wind shift, and that he couldn't locate her in the choppy seas. The transmission ended abruptly, suggesting the radio had been damaged or the boat had lost power. The Coast Guard response was immediate and massive. Within 30 minutes, 3 cutters, 2 helicopters, and a C-130 aircraft were searching the area where Michael had reported their position. The search continued through the night and expanded to cover over 500 square miles of ocean. At dawn on September 16th, searchers made their first discovery. Debris from the Aurora was found scattered across a 2-mile area. The boat's life ring, seat cushions, and several pieces of fiberglass hull were floating in the moderate swells. Most tellingly, they found Emma's favorite pink life jacket, torn and stained with what appeared to be blood. But despite the extensive search effort, neither Michael nor Emma's body was ever recovered. This wasn't unusual in maritime accidents. The Pacific Ocean rarely gives up its victims. After 5 days, the active search was suspended, though Coast Guard aircraft continued to watch for signs of survivors during routine patrols. The initial investigation by the Coast Guard and local authorities concluded that the Aurora had suffered catastrophic hull failure, possibly due to striking submerged debris or experiencing an unusually large wave. The official report stated that both Michael and Emma Thompson were presumed dead, victims of a tragic maritime accident. Jennifer Thompson was devastated but not entirely surprised. She knew sailing could be dangerous, and Michael had always been somewhat reckless on the water. She had repeatedly asked him to be more careful, especially when Emma was aboard. Now her worst fears had been realized. The insurance claims process began immediately. Pacific Coast Insurance, ironically Michael's own employer, handled his life insurance policy. A separate company covered Emma's policy. Both insurers conducted routine investigations but found no evidence of fraud. The physical evidence supported an accidental sinking. Michael had no known financial troubles, and he was a respected member of the maritime community. After 6 months, both insurance companies paid out the full policy amounts, $1.5 million for Michael and $500,000 for Emma. Jennifer used the money to pay off the mortgage and establish a memorial foundation in Emma's name. She never suspected that the man she had loved and trusted had orchestrated the entire tragedy. For the first 5 years after the disappearance, Jennifer focused on grieving and rebuilding her life. She sold the Newport Beach home, which held too many painful memories, and moved to a smaller house in nearby Laguna Beach. She continued running her interior design business but scaled back significantly. Most of her energy went toward the Emma Thompson Foundation, which provided sailing safety equipment to youth programs. But by 2017, Jennifer began experiencing nagging doubts about the official version of events. Small inconsistencies that she had initially dismissed started to bother her. Why had Michael chosen that particular weekend for sailing when the weather forecast showed possible afternoon winds? Why had he taken Emma so far from shore when they usually stayed closer to the coast? Most puzzling, why had the boat's emergency beacon never activated? These questions might have remained unanswered if not for a chance encounter that changed everything. In March 2018, Jennifer was having lunch at a restaurant in Laguna Beach when she overheard a conversation at the next table. 2 men were discussing someone they knew who had disappeared to avoid creditors and was living the good life in Costa Rica. One of the men mentioned that this person had worked in insurance and knew exactly how to disappear without a trace. Something about the conversation struck Jennifer as familiar, though she couldn't immediately place why. That night, she found herself wondering for the first time whether Michael's disappearance might not have been accidental. Jennifer's transformation from grieving widow to determined investigator began slowly. She started by requesting copies of all official reports related to the Aurora's sinking. What she discovered in those documents shocked her. The Coast Guard investigation had noted several anomalies that were never fully explained. First, the debris pattern was inconsistent with a catastrophic hull failure. Instead of being concentrated in one area, the wreckage was spread across several miles in a pattern more consistent with deliberate scuttling. Second, none of the boat's safety equipment had been deployed. The emergency beacon, life raft, and flares were all found still secured to the boat, suggesting the emergency had developed too quickly for Michael to use them. Most disturbing, the blood found on Emma's life jacket had never been DNA tested. The Coast Guard had assumed it belonged to Emma, but Jennifer realized that no one had confirmed this crucial detail. What really caught Jennifer's attention was a witness statement that had been buried in the case file. A couple sailing near Catalina Island reported seeing a boat matching the Aurora's description anchored in a secluded cove around midnight on September 15th, 6 hours after Michael's Mayday call. The boat had no lights and appeared to be deliberately hidden from view. Jennifer hired a private investigator, former LAPD Detective Raymond Castillo, to review the case. Castillo had specialized in financial crimes and immediately recognized patterns that the Coast Guard had missed. He began by examining Michael's financial records, which required obtaining court orders since Michael was legally dead. What Castillo discovered was financial devastation on a scale that Jennifer never could have imagined. The foreclosure notices, the massive credit card debt, the unpaid taxes, all of it had been hidden from her through Michael's elaborate deceptions. More shocking still, Castillo found evidence that Michael had been moving money offshore in the months before his disappearance. 3 different bank accounts in the Cayman Islands had received wire transfers totaling $400,000 from accounts Michael controlled. The transfers were made under the names of shell corporations that Michael had established using his insurance industry connections. The final transfer had occurred just 2 days before the Aurora's last voyage. Now I want to ask you something, and I really want to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you discovered that your spouse had been lying about your family's finances for years, and then they disappeared under suspicious circumstances, what would be your first instinct? Would you assume the worst, or would you try to find another explanation? Jennifer's reaction might surprise you. Instead of immediately concluding that Michael had faked his death, Jennifer initially hoped there might be an innocent explanation. Perhaps Michael had been trying to protect assets from creditors. Maybe he had been planning to surprise her with a financial recovery plan. She desperately wanted to believe that the man she had loved was not capable of the betrayal that the evidence suggested. But Castillo's investigation continued to uncover damning evidence. Bank security cameras had captured Michael visiting a safety deposit box facility in Los Angeles 3 times in the week before his disappearance. He had rented the box under an assumed name and paid cash for 3 years in advance. When Jennifer obtained a court order to open the box, they found it contained fake identification documents for both Michael and Emma, along with $50,000 in cash. The fake IDs were sophisticated enough to pass casual inspection but not detailed forensic analysis. They had been created by a document forgery ring that operated out of Tijuana, Mexico. Police records showed that Michael had crossed the border into Mexico 4 times in the months before his disappearance, each time claiming to be on business trips for his insurance company. Perhaps the most chilling discovery came when Castillo interviewed employees at the marina where Michael kept the Aurora. A dock worker remembered seeing Michael working on the boat alone during several late-night visits in the weeks before the disappearance. The worker had noticed that Michael seemed to be removing equipment rather than installing it, which struck him as odd. Security camera footage from the marina, which had been preserved far longer than usual due to an unrelated investigation, showed Michael making these nocturnal visits. In one particularly clear image, he could be seen loading what appeared to be a small inflatable boat into the Aurora's cabin. This boat was never found among the wreckage, leading investigators to conclude that Michael had used it to escape after scuttling the Aurora. By 2020, Jennifer had accumulated enough evidence to convince the FBI to reopen the case as a potential fraud investigation. Federal agents were particularly interested in the offshore bank accounts and the fake identification documents. They also began working with international law enforcement agencies to search for Michael and Emma in countries known to harbor fugitives. The breakthrough came in October 2022, when an American tourist in Belize photographed a man and young woman at a beach resort near Placencia. The man bore a strong resemblance to Michael Thompson, while the woman appeared to be the right age to be Emma, now 28 years old. The tourist had taken the photo randomly while capturing sunset shots and only realized its potential significance after seeing a television documentary about the case. Facial recognition software confirmed with 87% certainty that the man in the photograph was Michael Thompson. The woman's identity was harder to confirm since Emma had been only 8 when she disappeared, but computer aging software suggested a strong match. Most convincingly, the woman had a distinctive birthmark on her left shoulder that was identical to one Emma had possessed. FBI agents working with Belizean authorities tracked the man and woman to a small resort town where they had been living under the names Robert and Amanda Wilson. They ran a successful sport fishing charter business and were well regarded in the expatriate community. Robert Wilson was known as a careful boat captain who never took unnecessary risks, a far cry from the reckless sailor Michael Thompson had pretended to be. On November 3, 2022, Belizean police arrested both individuals on charges related to immigration fraud. DNA testing conclusively confirmed their identities as Michael and Emma Thompson. After a decade of living as fugitives, their elaborate deception had finally been exposed. Emma's arrest was particularly heartbreaking for Jennifer. The 8-year-old girl she remembered had grown into a young woman who had been completely isolated from her mother and the outside world. Emma had been told that Jennifer had died in a car accident shortly after their disappearance, and that they were hiding from dangerous people who wanted to hurt their family. For 14 years, Emma had believed her father's lies. She had been homeschooled using fake credentials and had never been allowed to use the internet or contact anyone from their previous life. Michael had created an elaborate alternate reality where he was protecting Emma from threats that existed only in his imagination. The psychological damage inflicted on Emma by this deception cannot be overstated. Forensic psychologists who evaluated her described symptoms consistent with long-term psychological abuse and isolation. She had been completely dependent on Michael for information about the outside world and had no way to verify his claims about Jennifer's death or the supposed threats they were fleeing. During FBI interviews, Emma revealed details about their life in Belize that provided insight into Michael's long-term planning. He had purchased property using the proceeds from the insurance fraud and had established a new identity so thoroughly that he even paid taxes under his assumed name. He had told the local community that his wife had died of cancer and that he had brought his daughter to Belize for a fresh start. Michael's arrest statements showed no remorse for the pain he had caused Jennifer or the trauma he had inflicted on Emma. Instead, he maintained that he had been forced into desperate action by financial circumstances beyond his control. He claimed that declaring bankruptcy would have destroyed Emma's future, and that disappearing was the only way to give her a chance at a good life. This self-serving rationalization is typical of family annihilators who genuinely believe their actions are justified. Michael had convinced himself that he was a loving father making the ultimate sacrifice for his daughter's welfare, rather than a selfish criminal who had destroyed multiple lives to avoid facing consequences for his financial failures. Let me ask you this, and please share your thoughts in the comments. How do you think Emma is dealing with learning that everything she believed about her life for the past 14 years was a lie? How would you even begin to rebuild a relationship with your child after discovering they had been deliberately hidden from you for over a decade? The legal proceedings that followed Michael's arrest were complex and emotionally wrenching for everyone involved. Michael was extradited to the United States to face federal charges of insurance fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. He was also charged with kidnapping, since he had taken Emma across international borders without Jennifer's consent and under false pretenses. Emma's situation was more complicated. While she had been a victim of her father's crimes, she was also technically an adult who had been living illegally in Belize. Immigration authorities initially detained her pending resolution of her status, but Jennifer's advocacy and media attention quickly led to her release into Jennifer's custody. The reunion between Jennifer and Emma was both joyful and heartbreaking. Emma had no memory of her mother and initially viewed her with suspicion and fear. Years of isolation and indoctrination had left her unable to trust anyone except Michael. She struggled to understand that the woman claiming to be her mother was not the enemy her father had described. Jennifer approached the reunion with extraordinary patience and compassion. She understood that Emma was as much a victim as she was, and that rebuilding their relationship would require time and professional help. She hired trauma specialists who had experience working with cult survivors and kidnapping victims, the closest analogies to Emma's unique situation. Slowly, Emma began to recover memories from her early childhood. Jennifer's photo albums and home videos helped trigger recollections of their life together before the disappearance. Most powerfully, Emma remembered the sailing lessons Jennifer had given her and her favorite bedtime stories. These shared memories became the foundation for rebuilding their relationship. Michael's trial began in September 2023 and lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of his elaborate fraud scheme, including financial records, witness testimony, and the fake identification documents. Michael's defense team argued that he had been driven to desperate action by impossible financial pressures, but they could not explain away the premeditated nature of his crimes. The most devastating testimony came from Emma herself. Despite her trauma, she chose to testify about the lies Michael had told her and the isolation he had imposed. Her statement to the court was brief but powerful. "My father stole my childhood, my mother, and 14 years of my life. He made me complicit in hurting someone who loved me. No financial problem justifies what he did to our family." On November 15, 2023, Michael Thompson was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The judge noted that while financial desperation might explain his initial crimes, the continued deception and psychological abuse of Emma demonstrated a callous disregard for others that warranted the maximum sentence. Jennifer's victim impact statement focused not on punishment but on healing. She spoke about the devastating impact of losing her daughter and the additional trauma of discovering that the loss had been deliberately orchestrated by someone she trusted. But she also expressed hope that Michael's conviction would help Emma understand that she was truly a victim and not responsible for any of the crimes committed. The insurance companies were required to repay the fraudulent claims, plus interest and penalties, totaling over $3.5 million. Jennifer donated a significant portion of this money to organizations that help families of missing persons and support trauma recovery programs. She also established a new foundation focused on helping children who have been victims of parental abduction. Emma's recovery has been gradual but encouraging. With intensive therapy and her mother's support, she has begun to reclaim her identity and build new relationships. She completed her high school education and is now attending college, studying psychology with the goal of helping other trauma survivors. She has also become an advocate for stronger international cooperation in parental abduction cases. The Thompson case has had broader implications for maritime safety and insurance fraud prevention. The Coast Guard has revised its investigation protocols for missing vessel cases to include more thorough examination of financial motives. Insurance companies have also implemented additional safeguards to detect suspicious policy changes and unusual beneficiary arrangements. For Jennifer, the resolution of the case has brought both closure and a new purpose. She continues her interior design work but has become a prominent voice in the community of families affected by fraudulent disappearances. She speaks regularly at conferences and has written a book about her experience that has helped other families navigate similar tragedies. The psychological impact of Michael's betrayal will likely affect both Jennifer and Emma for the rest of their lives. Trust, once shattered so completely, is difficult to rebuild. But their story also demonstrates the remarkable resilience of the human spirit and the power of love to overcome even the most devastating deceptions. As we conclude this shocking case, I want to leave you with this thought. The Thompson case reminds us that the people closest to us are sometimes capable of the greatest betrayals. But it also shows us that truth has a way of emerging, even after years of careful deception, and that families can heal from even the most devastating wounds. What aspects of this case affected you most deeply? Do you think Michael's sentence was appropriate, or should it have been longer? How do you think Emma will continue to heal from this trauma? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this case has impacted you, please subscribe to our channel and share this video. Stories like these need to be told, not to sensationalize tragedy, but to help us understand how such devastating betrayals occur and how families can survive them. Thank you for joining me for this difficult but important story.